B12 is one of the largest and most structurally complex biomolecules in nature. So we know that B12 is absolutely essential for maturation of the red blood cells. It's not made by plants, it's not made by animals, it's made by bacteria. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. That's the title of my talk. You can know that B12 is one of the largest and most structurally complex biomolecules in nature. I'll just go to the few basics which are, as we say, the manjan part of the whole thing. And the biochemistry, the anatomy and the physiology, which we all hate. But how it applies then to our principle of the more sympathetic and the vegan and the vegetarian diet to bring that out. So vitamins are molecules which are essential in an organism's metabolism. Metabolism is a set of life-sustaining chemical reactions which convert food to energy, which make building blocks out of that food, especially in our liver. Then they eliminate toxic wastes. So that is metabolism. The 13 vitamins or the core factors were discovered all in the early 1900s. B12 was discovered somewhere in the 1940s. B12 we know is required for every cell's building block. And the building blocks of a cell are its RNA and DNA. So we know that B12 is absolutely essential for maturation of the red blood cells and for the formation of the myelin sheath. And the myelin sheath helps in transmission of nerve impulses and also in the intracerebral crosstalk between neurons. And so whenever there is a problem, you get problems like peripheral neuropathy, you get subacute combined degeneration, you get megaloblastic anemia. I've seen a patient who just came with both hands not able to work and not move, and this was a patient with severe B12 deficiency. So B12 we know is a red colored substance which contains the element cobalt, and that is why the name cobalamin. The daily requirement is small, just 2.4 micrograms, but it is a rare substance in food, and the reason is it is made by the humblest of creatures. It's not made by plants, it's not made by animals, it's made by bacteria. So our gut bacteria, which are almost to the tune of 10 raised to 14 in the colon, make B12. But the absorption unfortunately occurs in the distal ileum, and therefore there is not much by way of absorption which we can do. However, we belong to the family of great apes, and our ape cousins, the gorillas, never suffer from B12 deficiency. So why does that happen? Many of the great apes are vegetarian and they don't. The reason, ladies and gentlemen, is not very appealing. The reason is that they do coprophagy, which modern humans will not do. So the B12 which the animals take come from the earth's surface, and the bacteria trap the cobalt. It presupposes that you need a soil which is good in cobalt, taking off everything from the soil. We are adding urea, we are adding fertilizer. The whole earth's surface has changed, and alteration in environment, unseasonal rainfalls, acid rain, organisms which are not friendly to the normal organisms. There is a constant war going on in the soil between microbiomes of different species. And if organisms which are not going to be helpful to us are surviving and multiplying because of all our so-called modern ways of living, we are going to destroy the very sustenance which is sustaining us. The salivary glands, just to tell you where things go wrong, and so we'll understand what happens. So the salivary glands produce something called haptocorrin. It's also called transcobalamin 1. And when you masticate your food, the food goes down into the stomach. The cobalamin is separated from the meat by the action of hydrochloric acid and pepsin, and it is then in the presence of the haptocorrin brought into the duodenum. As soon as it crosses the pylorus and into the duodenum, it is acted upon by pancreatic enzymes, by pancreatic trypsin, etc., and it is combined with something called intrinsic factor, which is again made in the stomach by the parietal cells. The intrinsic factor and the cobalamin then combine. The cobalamin is chaperoned into the distal ileum, and there then it gets absorbed by another carrier molecule called transcobalamin 2, and then goes to the liver, and it has a great enterohepatic circulation. Now this, even Harrison admits, is why vegans don't fall prey to very easily to B12 deficiency, because the enterohepatic circulation is good, and therefore that keeps you going. But if you have problems in your distal ileum, you have any sort of malabsorption, your B12 levels will fall very rapidly. Again, in the cell, you know that this is a form of the folate molecule, which is called methyl tetrahydrofolate. This gets converted to tetrahydrofolate, which is important in the building blocks of nucleotides, purines and pyrimidines. Simultaneously, a very toxic molecule called homocysteine gets converted to a good amino acid called methionine, which catalyzes this reaction, needs cobalamin as a cofactor. If you don't have that, this reaction doesn't work. Homocysteine accumulates, damaging to all your endothelium. So your premature coronary artery disease or cerebrovascular disease, the higher incidence of strokes. A paper had come which blamed veganism for higher incidence of strokes, which was reversible by taking B12. So we know that if you have deficiencies of B12, you can land up with tremendous health problems. Okay, cognitive decline, anxiety, depression, dementia, erectile dysfunction, stunting of growth in children, a whole gamut of presentations. So now coming to the core issue. In the last about 10-12 years, when these so-called or the medical checkups became common, when a lot of people started undergoing these entire health packages, we found that the B12 levels used to be very low. And what struck me was that even non-vegetarians had a very low B12 level. Contrary to what I found, Harrison attributes dietary cobalamin decrease in non-vegetarians due to poverty and psychiatric illness. And a host of other factors which are more suited possibly to veterinary scientists will affect the B12 in animal lives, and the B12 then will not enter the muscle, liver and eggs and milk of the animal, and so the people who are going to consume them obviously will not have enough B12. Next, I come to what is called the hygiene hypothesis. We are obsessed with sanitation. We are obsessed with cleanliness. We have gone to this type of water. Now we drink all this every day. We are getting. All of them will cause a problem because it will interfere with your hydrochloric acid, which is required to work with intrinsic factor and help the cobalamin get it. There is a love-hate relationship between H. pylori and B12. H. pylori is supposed to cause gastric atrophy and therefore leads to parietal cell damage and leads to B12 deficiency because of that. And H. pylori initially causes antral gastritis and ulcer. Infections of this upper part, which are rampant in our country, and one infection which takes away B12 is Giardia. How can vegetarians and vegans help themselves out? That's a key question which I often asked myself. So I found very little in literature, but some things were important and they stood out. One thing was what is called shiitake mushroom, but most important which came out was fermented food, especially from the south. Okay, so the idli dosa type of food, the pickle, and anything which causes fermentation leads to the growth of beneficial bacteria. The time for B12 has come. Let the whole food, plant-based drug movement and the vegan movement. Thank you.